I invited my family to a nice dinner for my birthday. My brother laughed and said no one cared before they all canceled. I didn't argue. I just paid the bill and stopped paying their mortgage. Now, they're begging. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The private dining room at Le Petit Jardin was breathtaking, a masterclass in understated elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the long mahogany table, which was meticulously set for four. A lavish centerpiece of white orchids and silver eucalyptus branches stretched across the linen runner. It was my 60th birthday. For anyone else, this might have been just another milestone, but for me, it was a profound victory. Just 3 months prior, I had been confined to a hospital bed, fighting a severe and terrifying battle with pneumonia that had left my lungs scarred and my spirit entirely depleted. The doctors had been deeply concerned, and there were several nights when I lay awake, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, genuinely wondering if I would ever see the outside of that sterilized room again. But I had fought back. I had survived. And tonight was supposed to be the celebration of that survival, a joyous gathering with the only family I had left in this world. I sat at the head of the empty table, smoothing the fabric of my tailored emerald dress. The grandfather clock in the corner of the restaurant lobby chimed gently. It was 8:15. The reservation had been for 7:30. My phone sat silently next to my water goblet. For the past 45 minutes, I had been making excuses in my head. Traffic on the interstate is always terrible on a Friday, I told myself. Maybe Elijah had trouble getting the car started. Maybe Andrew's evening class ran late. I had texted my brother, Elijah, 3 times. I had called my sister-in-law, Natalia, twice. All my attempts had gone straight to voicemail. The heavy mahogany door to the private room creaked open, and the maitre d', a kind-eyed man named Julian who had known me for years, stepped inside. His professional smile barely masked the deep well of pity in his eyes. "Miss Mary," he said softly, his voice echoing slightly in the large, empty room. "The chef was wondering if you would like us to begin firing the first courses, or if we should continue to hold." I felt a hot flush of humiliation creep up my neck. "Let's hold just a little longer, Julian," I managed to say, forcing a tight, unconvincing smile. "I'm sure they are just caught up in something. They wouldn't miss this." Julian bowed his head respectfully and retreated, closing the door with a soft click that sounded horribly final. The silence of the room pressed in on me, heavy and suffocating. I picked up my phone again. My hands, still slightly unsteady from the lingering weakness of my illness, trembled as I unlocked the screen. Still nothing. Finally, at 8:30, the screen lit up with an incoming call. It was Elijah. A wave of profound relief washed over me. I practically snatched the phone off the table, pressing it to my ear. "Elijah, thank goodness. Where are you all? Julian is holding the first course, but the chef." "Mary, listen." Elijah's voice cut through my eager rambling. He didn't sound rushed, nor did he sound apologetic. He sounded irritated, as if my phone call was a tedious chore he was finally ticking off his list. "We're not going to make it tonight." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. I blinked, trying to process the sudden shift in reality. "What? What do you mean you're not going to make it? Are you okay? Did something happen on the road?" I heard a faint sound in the background of his call. It sounded like clinking glasses and laughter. "Nothing happened," Elijah sighed loudly into the receiver. "Natalia has a terrible migraine, completely out of nowhere. She can't handle the lights or the noise of a restaurant. And Andrew is right in the middle of some massive live streaming event for his digital creator channel, or whatever it is he does. He can't pause it." "But, Elijah," my voice cracked, betraying the sudden, crushing weight of my disappointment. "It's my 60th birthday. We planned this 2 months ago. You know how important this dinner was to me, especially after the hospital." There was a long, excruciating pause on the other end of the line. I waited for the apology, for the promise to make it up to me, for any shred of familial warmth. Instead, what I heard next shattered something fundamental inside of me. Elijah let out a short, dismissive laugh. It wasn't a warm chuckle, it was a scoff, laced with profound condescension. "Oh, come on, Mary. Stop being so dramatic. You're always making a mountain out of a molehill. It's just a birthday. Honestly, no one cares, it's just you. You're acting like the world revolves around this dinner. We'll just catch up some other time, okay? Anyway, I have to go. Natalia needs me to bring her some water." Before I could form a single syllable in response, before I could articulate the profound pain radiating through my chest, the line went dead. He had hung up on me. I sat there, the phone pressed against my ear, listening to the dial tone. "No one cares, it's just you." The words echoed in the empty, opulent room, mocking the elaborate floral arrangements and the crystal glasses. I slowly lowered the phone to the table. The physical weakness from my recent illness seemed to come rushing back all at once, settling deep into my bones. My chest felt incredibly tight, making it difficult to draw a full breath. I had spent my entire adult life providing for my brother, ensuring his family lacked for absolutely nothing, pouring my resources and my love into a bottomless pit of their entitlement. And here I was, sitting alone in a room I had paid a small fortune to reserve, completely and utterly discarded on the one night I asked to be celebrated. The door opened again, and Julian stepped in. He didn't need to ask. The devastation was undoubtedly painted clearly across my pale face. "Julian," I said, my voice eerily calm, stripped of all its previous hope and anxiety. "Please cancel the food orders. Bring me the check for the room deposit and the cancellation fees." "Ma'am, I am so deeply sorry," Julian whispered, stepping forward to clear the unused place settings. "Don't be," I replied, standing up and gathering my coat. The physical frailty I had felt moments ago was rapidly being replaced by a cold, unfamiliar numbness. I signed the exorbitant credit card receipt without blinking, leaving a massive tip for the staff who had their evening wasted. As I walked out into the cool, damp night air of the city, pulling my coat tight against the wind, I realized something with terrifying clarity. The betrayal stung far deeper than the illness ever could. The drive back to my empty house was a blur of neon streetlights and blinding headlights. I gripped the leather steering wheel of my car until my knuckles turned completely white, my mind playing Elijah's cruel laughter on a relentless, agonizing loop. "No one cares, it's just you." When I finally pulled into the driveway of my quiet, dark property, the sheer silence of the house was deafening. I didn't turn on the lights in the foyer. I simply walked into my study, sinking into the large leather armchair behind my heavy oak desk. I didn't cry. I think I was too profoundly shocked to cry. Instead, a deep, heavy exhaustion settled over me, anchoring me to the chair. Seeking some sort of distraction, some mindless noise to drown out the silence, I pulled out my phone and opened my social media applications. I don't know why I did it. Perhaps some masochistic part of my brain needed to see what was more important than my milestone birthday. It didn't take long to find out. Right at the top of my feed was a newly posted photo from Natalia. The location tag was boldly displayed. The Grand Azure Resort and Spa, an incredibly exclusive, outrageously expensive luxury retreat located about 2 hours out of the city. The photo was a brightly lit, perfectly filtered selfie. Natalia, looking radiant and completely free of any alleged migraine, was holding up a crystal flute of champagne. Beside her, my brother Elijah was grinning broadly, a freshly lit cigar between his teeth. In the background, lounging by a private fire pit, was my 25-year-old nephew, Andrew, glued to his phone, looking entirely unbothered by the world. The caption read, "Spontaneous weekend getaway with my 2 favorite boys. Sometimes you just have to escape the negativity and treat yourself to the luxury you deserve. Blessed family first spa weekend." I stared at the glowing screen, my eyes tracking over the timestamp. Posted 30 minutes ago. Exactly when Elijah had been on the phone with me, lying through his teeth about dark rooms and live streaming events. They had been popping champagne at a five-star resort. My heart hammered a frantic, irregular rhythm against my ribs. The sheer audacity of the lie, the casual cruelty of their deception, literally took my breath away. They hadn't just forgotten my birthday. They had actively planned an extravagant vacation to deliberately avoid it, using the very money I provided to fund their escape from my presence. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes as a wave of intense nausea rolled over me. I thought about the hospital. I thought about how, during those terrifying 2 weeks when I was struggling to breathe, Elijah had visited exactly once, staying for barely 15 minutes before complaining about the hospital parking fees and rushing out. Natalia hadn't visited at all, sending a cheap, wilted arrangement of carnations from a grocery store instead. And yet, every single month, like clockwork, my money flowed into their lives, keeping the roof over their heads and the luxury cars in their driveway. I opened my eyes and looked around my dimly lit study. The walls were lined with framed architectural blueprints and awards from my decades of work as a senior real estate developer. I had built a small empire with my own 2 hands, sacrificing sleep, relationships, and my own personal time to ensure my business thrived. I had fought tooth and nail in a cutthroat industry to secure my financial future. As I sat there in the dark, looking at the smiling faces of the family I had entirely funded, a strange, chilling sense of calm slowly began to wash over my grief. The hot, frantic pain of rejection was congealing into something else entirely, something hard, cold, and incredibly sharp. They thought I was just a lonely, pathetic older woman who would endlessly tolerate their disrespect, because I was desperate for their breadcrumbs of affection. They believed my generosity was a permanent, unbreakable fixture in their lives, an endless well they could draw from while spitting in the water. They had grown so accustomed to my quiet compliance that they had forgotten one crucial thing. To understand the sheer magnitude of their delusion, one has to understand the history that bound us together. I was 5 years older than Elijah. When our parents passed away in a tragic, unexpected car accident when I was in my late 20s and Elijah was just stepping out of college, my entire world imploded. On her deathbed, my mother, grasping my hand with her failing strength, had made me promise to look after my little brother. "He's fragile, Mary," she had whispered. "He doesn't have your drive. Promise me you'll make sure he's safe." I made that promise, and for over 3 decades, I had honored it to my own severe detriment. While I threw myself into the grueling world of commercial real estate, working 80-hour weeks to build my development firm from the ground up, Elijah drifted. He was an aspiring entrepreneur who never quite managed to launch a single successful business. He was a serial hobbyist, diving headfirst into expensive passions, gourmet cooking, amateur photography, vintage watch restoration, only to abandon them months later, leaving behind a trail of debt that I quietly swept up and paid off. Then, 15 years ago, he met Natalia. Natalia branded herself as a wellness consultant, which, as far as I could ever tell, meant she spent her days going to Pilates, drinking overpriced green juices, and judging the lifestyle choices of everyone around her. From the moment she entered Elijah's life, she recognized me not as a sister, but as a bank. Natalia was polished, beautiful in a very severe, high-maintenance way, and utterly ruthless. She possessed a terrifying ability to manipulate reality to suit her narrative. Within a year of their marriage, she had convinced Elijah that his continuous professional failures were not his fault, but the result of a cruel, unfeeling corporate world that simply didn't understand his vision. More insidiously, she began to plant the seed that my financial success was somehow inherently unfair to him. "Mary is just lucky," I once heard her whispering to Elijah at a Thanksgiving dinner years ago. "She stumbled into real estate at the right time. It's not fair that she hoards all that wealth while you, with all your brilliant ideas, have to struggle. Family is supposed to share." And share I did. When Andrew was born, I paid for the elite private preschools, the expensive tutors, and the lavish birthday parties. When Elijah's third startup collapsed, Leaving them on the brink of bankruptcy, I stepped in. 5 years ago, they found their dream home in an exclusive, gated suburban enclave. It was a sprawling, 5-bedroom estate with a 3-car garage and a meticulously landscaped backyard, a house that cost 3 times what Elijah could ever hope to afford. Natalia had wept in my office, claiming the stress of their cramped apartment was destroying her mental health and ruining Andrew's childhood. Elijah had looked at me with those wide, helpless eyes that always reminded me of our mother's dying wish. So I made the fatal mistake. I didn't co-sign a loan. I knew Elijah's credit was too destroyed for that. Instead, I set up a formalized arrangement. The mortgage remained strictly in my name, tied directly to one of my high-yield corporate accounts. Every single month on the first day of the month, a massive sum of money was automatically drafted from my business holdings to pay for the roof over their heads. It was meant to be a temporary safety net until Elijah got his new consulting firm off the ground. But 5 years had passed, and the consulting firm remained a fiction. Instead, my money funded Natalia's designer wardrobe, Andrew's top-of-the-line gaming computers for his digital creator career that yielded zero income, and spontaneous trips to luxury resorts. Whenever I gently brought up the topic of them taking over the payments, Natalia would skillfully deploy guilt. "Mary," she would say, her voice dripping with condescension masked as concern. "You know Elijah's blood pressure can't handle financial stress right now. You have so much, Mary. What's a few thousand a month to you? You can't take it with you when you die, and since you don't have a family of your own." That was her favorite weapon, reminding me of my solitude. She skillfully isolated Elijah from me, ensuring our interactions were brief, superficial, and always centered around a financial request. She painted me as the lonely, workaholic spinster who was fortunate to have them to spend her money on. I sat at my desk, the glow of the computer monitor illuminating the architectural awards on my wall. I pulled up my secure banking portal. I navigated through the complex web of my corporate accounts until I found the specific ledger detailing the monthly mortgage auto drafts for the suburban estate. For 5 years, I had authorized this drain on my resources out of love, guilt, and a misplaced sense of duty. They thought they had outsmarted me. They thought my love for my brother blinded me to their blatant parasitism. But I was a senior real estate developer. I dealt with hostile takeovers, contract breaches, and ruthless negotiations every single day of my life. I knew exactly how to dismantle an unstable foundation. I moved my mouse over the active auto draft authorization. The next payment, a staggering sum designed to cover both the principal and the exorbitant property taxes of their luxury home, was scheduled to clear in exactly 3 days, on the 1st of the month. I clicked the button that read, "Revoke authorization." A warning prompt popped up on the screen. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer? This action will result in immediate non-payment of the associated mortgage account." I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. I clicked confirm. The morning sun filtered through the heavy silk drapes of my bedroom, casting long, pale shadows across the hardwood floor. I had not slept a single hour. I had spent the entire night sitting in the same leather chair in my study, watching the digital clock on my desk slowly tick toward dawn. Usually, a night without sleep after recovering from severe pneumonia would have left me physically devastated, gasping for breath and reaching for my inhaler. But this morning, I felt an entirely different kind of energy coursing through my veins. It was a cold, sharp, and intensely focused clarity. The victim who had sat alone in that extravagant private dining room was gone. In her place was Mary the developer, the woman who had spent 30 years navigating the shark-infested waters of commercial real estate. I did not build my empire by allowing people to steal from me, and I certainly did not build it by letting people mock me to my face while standing in a house I purchased. At exactly 8 o'clock, I picked up my phone. I didn't call Elijah. I didn't call Natalia. I dialed a number I hadn't used in nearly 4 years. The line rang twice before a gruff, familiar voice answered. "Richard, speaking." "Richard, it's Mary," I said, my voice steady and devoid of any emotional tremor. There was a brief pause, followed by the sound of a chair squeaking. Richard was a former forensic accountant turned private investigator. I kept him on a very generous retainer for my firm to run deep-level background checks on potential high-risk commercial tenants. He was brilliant, discreet, and utterly ruthless when it came to uncovering hidden assets and concealed debts. "Mary, it's been a while," Richard said, his tone shifting into professional curiosity. "Usually, my phone doesn't ring on a Saturday morning unless a major deal is going sideways. What do we have? A fraudulent shell company trying to lease the new downtown high-rise?" "No, Richard, this is personal," I replied, standing up and walking over to the large window overlooking my garden. "I need a comprehensive financial profile, and I need it expedited. I am talking about a deep dive. Bank accounts, credit lines, registered businesses, tax filings, vehicle leases. Everything." "Who are we looking at?" he asked, and I could hear the faint clicking of his keyboard in the background. "My brother, Elijah, and his wife, Natalia," I said, the names tasting like ash in my mouth. "I also want you to look into my nephew, Andrew. I want to know exactly where their money is going, because I know for an absolute fact they do not have a legitimate income stream capable of supporting their current lifestyle. They have been entirely reliant on me for their mortgage and major expenses, but I suspect there is a massive web of debt I am not seeing." "Consider it done," Richard said smoothly. "I will need their social security numbers and current addresses, though I assume you have those on file. I'll pull the public records first, then run the deeper credit diagnostics. Give me 48 hours. "I have the information ready to send," I told him, walking back to my desk to pull up my encrypted family files. "And Richard, I want special attention paid to Natalia's spending habits. Look for luxury travel, high-end retail, and anything related to this wellness consulting business she claims to operate. I'll dig up every receipt she's ever signed," Richard promised before hanging up. With the investigation in motion, I set to work on my own preparations. I opened my heavy fireproof filing cabinet and pulled out the massive, 3-inch thick binder labeled Suburban Property Legal. Inside were the original deeds, the mortgage agreements, and the property tax records for the 5-bedroom estate Elijah and Natalia called home. I traced my finger over the bold, black ink of the legal deed. Sole owner, Mary. They had lived there for so long, comfortably shielded from the reality of their own incompetence, that they had genuinely convinced themselves the house was theirs. Natalia decorated it, hosted lavish parties in it, and filmed her ridiculous social media videos inside its walls, all while treating me like an annoying, distant relative who occasionally sent a check. I spent the rest of the weekend meticulously organizing my financial records. I printed out 5 years' worth of bank statements, highlighting every single transfer, every emergency loan I had forgiven, and every spontaneous credit card bill I had paid off to save Elijah's credit score. The sheer volume of the highlighted numbers was nauseating. Millions of dollars. I had poured millions into a black hole of entitlement. By Monday morning, the first of the month had arrived. At 9:00 a.m., my bank's automated system usually initiated the massive wire transfer to the mortgage lender. At 9:01 a.m., I logged into my portal. The scheduled transfer was completely gone. $0 had left my account. The trap was officially set, and the timer had started ticking. The fallout did not take long. The mortgage company I used for that specific property was notoriously aggressive. They did not offer grace periods for accounts that had been on autopay for half a decade. By Wednesday afternoon, the automated delinquency notices would have been triggered. I was sitting in my downtown office, reviewing blueprints for a new commercial plaza, when my personal cell phone began to vibrate violently across the glass surface of my desk. I glanced at the caller ID, Elijah. I let it ring. It stopped, then immediately started vibrating again, then a third time. On the fourth attempt, I calmly picked it up and pressed accept, putting the phone on speaker so my hands were free to continue making notes on my blueprints. "Hello, Elijah," I said, keeping my tone perfectly neutral, as if we were discussing the weather. "Mary, thank God, why haven't you been answering?" Elijah's voice was frantic, breathless, and laced with genuine panic. "Listen, there is a massive issue. I just got a terrifying email from the mortgage lender, and then a physical letter was literally overnighted to the house. They are claiming the payment bounced. They are threatening to report a delinquency to the credit bureaus immediately. You need to call your bank, Mary. Your auto-pay system must have glitched." I set my red pen down on the desk. "My banking system did not glitch, Elijah. The transfer was canceled." There was a dead, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, the sound ragged and uneven. What? What do you mean it was canceled? Did someone hack your account?" "No one hacked my account," I replied softly, leaning back in my leather chair. "I logged in on Friday night, and I manually revoked the authorization for the payment." You canceled it," Elijah stammered, his brain clearly struggling to process the information. "Mary, you can't do that. That's the house. That's where we live. The payment is over $8,000. We don't have that kind of liquid cash just lying around, you know that." Before I could respond, there was a sudden shuffling sound, and the audio quality shifted. Natalia had snatched the phone from his hands. "Mary, what on earth is going wrong with you?" Natalia's voice was sharp, polished, and dripping with aggressive condescension. "Are you seriously throwing a temper tantrum over a silly little dinner? Is this what this is about? You are jeopardizing our home, our sanctuary, because you're feeling slighted about a birthday." I felt a cold smile touch the corners of my mouth. There it was, the classic Natalia maneuver, instantly framing my boundaries as an unhinged, emotional overreaction. "It wasn't a glitch, Natalia, and it certainly isn't a tantrum," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "It is a permanent financial correction. I am no longer funding your lifestyle." "You are unbelievable," Natalia shrieked, dropping the polished facade entirely. "You have no idea what kind of stress we are under. Elijah is working day and night trying to secure capital for his new consulting firm. I had a crippling migraine all weekend, and you expect us to cater to your need for attention while you hold our home hostage. You are a bitter, lonely woman, Mary." "A crippling migraine?" I echoed, pulling up the screenshot I had saved on my desktop. "That is fascinating, Natalia. Because from the photos you posted from the Grand Azure Resort and spa at exactly 8:30 on Friday evening, you looked remarkably healthy. In fact, you looked absolutely radiant holding that glass of vintage champagne." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the beautiful, stunning silence of a liar realizing they have been completely caught in the snare. Natalia stammered, her voice suddenly losing all its venom, replaced by a frantic, scrambling panic. That was an old photo, Mary. It was a throwback post. I was just trying to keep my engagement up for my wellness channel." "Do not insult my intelligence," I snapped, the ice in my voice finally cracking to reveal the iron beneath. "I saw the live video Andrew posted on his story from the cabana. I saw the date stamp. You used my money, the money that was supposed to keep a roof over my brother's head, to fund a luxury vacation specifically to avoid my birthday. You lied to me, you mocked me, and you took my money. Those days are permanently over. If you want to keep living in that house, you better figure out how to pay the $8,000 by Friday, or the lender will begin formal default proceedings." "Mary, please, you can't." Elijah's voice pleaded in the background, but I had heard enough. I reached forward and tapped the red button, ending the call. I sat in the quiet of my office, my heart beating steadily. The first blow had been struck, but I knew Natalia would not surrender easily. She would fight back with lies and manipulation. But she had forgotten one crucial thing. I held all the paper. Over the next 48 hours, the situation escalated exactly as I had anticipated. Natalia, entirely incapable of accepting defeat or taking responsibility, immediately launched a desperate campaign to control the narrative. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications from our extended family group chats and social media. Natalia was posting long, tearful paragraphs about toxic financial abuse and how certain narcissistic family members try to control their loved ones through money. She painted a picture of herself and Elijah as tragic victims of my sudden, cruel caprice. Several distant cousins, entirely ignorant of the truth, left sympathetic comments, subtly judging me for abandoning my brother. I did not respond to a single post. I did not defend myself. I simply waited. On Thursday afternoon, Richard walked into my office. He didn't say a word as he approached my desk. He just dropped a thick, manila folder onto the glass surface. The satisfying thud echoed in the large room. "It's worse than you thought, Mary," Richard said, taking a seat in the chair opposite me. He looked genuinely grim. "I've seen a lot of financial train wrecks in my career, but this is a masterpiece of delusion." I opened the folder. The very first document was a state business registry report. "Elijah's consulting firm," Richard pointed at the paper. "It doesn't exist. He dissolved the LLC 3.5 years ago. He hasn't filed a single corporate tax return or declared a single dollar of business income since." I stared at the paper, a sickening feeling twisting in my stomach. 3.5 years. He had been looking me in the eye, telling me about his clients and his meetings, and it had all been an elaborate, fabricated lie to keep the mortgage payments flowing. "Now look at the next section," Richard instructed, his voice low. I flipped the page, and my breath hitched. It was a comprehensive credit report for Natalia. "She doesn't have an income, obviously," Richard explained. "But she has been opening credit cards using the suburban house as her primary asset listed on the applications. Because you pay the mortgage directly and the property taxes are flawless, the address looks pristine to automated credit algorithms. She has maxed out 7 different high-yield credit cards in the last 2 years." I scanned the itemized lists. Tens of thousands of dollars at designer boutiques, outrageous bills for cosmetic procedures, luxury travel agencies. "And Andrew?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Ah, the digital creator," Richard sighed. "He financed $50,000 worth of camera equipment, lighting, and computer hardware through a high-interest personal loan that Elijah co-signed. A loan that is currently 60 days past due. They are drowning, Mary. If you hadn't been paying that massive mortgage every month, they would have been living in their cars years ago." I closed the folder, resting my hands flat against the cool manila paper. The sheer scale of the deception was breathtaking. They hadn't just been relying on me, they had been using my financial stability as a shield to engage in reckless, catastrophic financial fraud. "Thank you, Richard," I said quietly. "Invoice my accounting department for double your usual rush fee." Richard nodded, standing up. "What are you going to do?" "I am going to let them hang themselves," I replied. The opportunity presented itself the very next morning. I was standing in the lobby of my building, waiting for my driver, when I saw him. Elijah was pacing furiously back and forth in front of the revolving doors, his hair disheveled, wearing a wrinkled suit that looked like he had slept in it. When he saw me, he practically sprinted across the marble floor. "Mary, you have to talk to me. Please," he begged, his voice cracking, entirely devoid of the smug arrogance he had displayed on the phone a week prior. The lobby security guard took a step forward, but I raised my hand to wave him off. "I am listening, Elijah," I said coldly, crossing my arms. "You can't do this to us," he pleaded, tears actually welling in his eyes. "Natalia is a wreck. She hasn't stopped crying for 2 days. The bank called me this morning. They are going to initiate the default process on Monday if the funds aren't cleared. You're punishing us too harshly. She's just stressed, Mary. You know how she gets when she's stressed. She didn't mean those things she said, and the trip was just a mistake." He was still defending her. Even staring down the barrel of homelessness, he was still repeating the scripts she had written for him. I reached into my designer tote bag and pulled out a single, stapled packet, a condensed version of Richard's file. I slapped it hard against his chest. He fumbled, grabbing it before it fell. "What is this?" he asked, looking down at the papers. "That is the truth, Elijah," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the vast lobby. "That is the record of your dissolved LLC from 3 years ago. That is the itemized list of Natalia's $80,000 in secret credit card debt. And that is the default notice on Andrew's equipment loan." Elijah's face drained of all color. He stared at the first page, his mouth opening and closing silently like a fish suffocating on dry land. "You haven't been working, Elijah. You've been lying to me for years," I continued, stepping closer to him, refusing to let him look away. "And Natalia hasn't been stressed. She has been systematically burning through money that doesn't exist, using my property as her collateral. You aren't victims of my cruelty. You are victims of your own spectacular greed." "Mary, I didn't know about the credit cards," he whispered, his hands shaking violently as he flipped to the second page. "I swear to God, Mary, I didn't know." "Ignorance is not an excuse, and it certainly doesn't pay a mortgage," I said, turning my back on him and walking toward the glass doors where my car was waiting. "You have until the end of the month to vacate my property. If you are not gone, I will have the sheriff remove you." The final showdown did not happen in a courtroom or a corporate boardroom. It happened, as these things so often do, in the aggressively floral-scented living room of our eldest living relative, Aunt Helen. On Sunday afternoon, I received a frantic text message from my cousin, Sarah, stating that a critical family emergency meeting had been called. Natalia, in a last-ditch effort to weaponize the extended family against me, had summoned everyone who would listen. She was going to try and publicly shame me into turning the money back on before the bank formally seized the property on Monday morning. I arrived at Aunt Helen's house precisely at 2 o'clock. I wore a tailored navy suit, my hair perfectly swept back, carrying nothing but a slim, black leather portfolio. The physical weakness from my pneumonia was a distant memory. I felt like a general stepping onto a battlefield I had meticulously prepared. When I walked into the crowded living room, the conversation immediately died. Aunt Helen, Cousin Sarah, my Uncle David, and several other relatives were seated on the various floral sofas. In the center of the room, playing the role of the tragic, persecuted heroine to absolute perfection, was Natalia. She wore no makeup, her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she was clutching a crumpled tissue. Beside her sat Elijah, looking entirely hollowed out, staring blankly at the carpet. Andrew, my nephew, was sulking in the corner, glaring at me with adolescent venom. "Mary," Aunt Helen started, her voice trembling slightly, "Natalia has been telly. NG us some very distressing things. She says you are abruptly foreclosing on their home out of spite. She says you're leaving them on the street because they missed your birthday." I remained standing near the entryway, projecting a calm, unyielding authority. "Is that what she told you, Aunt Helen?" Natalia stood up, her eyes flashing with a dangerous, cornered desperation. "Don't try to manipulate them, Mary. Tell them the truth. Tell them how you canceled the mortgage payment without any warning. Tell them how you are destroying your own brother's life over a perceived slight." She turned to the family, fresh tears welling in her eyes, a truly masterful performance. "Elijah has been working himself into the ground for his consulting business. We have been struggling, yes, but we are family. And Mary, who has more money than she could ever spend, is throwing us out like garbage." A murmur of sympathetic disapproval rippled through the room. Uncle David shook his head, looking at me with severe disappointment. "Mary, family is family. You don't make people homeless to prove a point." I let the silence stretch. I let Natalia bask in her fleeting moment of manufactured victory. I looked at each of my relatives, making direct eye contact, before I finally unclasped my black leather portfolio. "Family is indeed family, Uncle David," I began, my voice clear and ringing with absolute certainty. "Which is exactly why I paid the mortgage on that 5-bedroom luxury estate for 5 entire years. I paid it every single month, without fail, to support my brother's business endeavors." I pulled out the first stack of papers and handed them to Aunt Helen, who looked down at them in confusion. What you are holding, Aunt Helen, is the official state registry report for Elijah's consulting business, I stated, my words falling like heavy stones into the quiet room. Take a close look at the date of dissolution. The business was formally shut down 3.5 years ago. Elijah has not worked a single day since. The entire enterprise was a fabricated lie designed to keep my money flowing into their bank accounts. Aunt Helen gasped, her hands trembling as she adjusted her reading glasses. The room went dead silent. "That's a lie," Natalia shrieked, her carefully constructed facade cracking violently. "She printed fake documents. She's trying to ruin us." "I don't need to print fake documents, Natalia, when your actual financial history is so remarkably vibrant," I countered, pulling out the next stack of papers and handing them to Uncle David. "That is a comprehensive credit report. While I was paying the mortgage and the property taxes, Natalia was busy taking out high-yield credit cards using my property as her collateral." $80,000, Uncle David. $80,000 spent on designer clothes, luxury resort vacations, and cosmetic procedures, all while claiming they were destitute. $80,000? Uncle David choked out, his face turning an angry shade of red as he scanned the itemized lists. "Natalia, what on earth is this?" "And let us not forget the digital creator," I continued, turning my gaze to Andrew, who suddenly shrank back against the wall. $50,000 in high-interest personal loans to buy camera equipment for a channel that generates zero revenue, co-signed by a man with no income. I turned back to the center of the room, my voice rising, filling the space with undeniable truth. I am not making them homeless over a birthday dinner. I am severing a parasitic financial relationship because they have spent 5 years lying to my face, using my love for my brother as a shield to commit staggering financial fraud. The trip they took on my birthday, the one they lied about to avoid seeing me, was the final straw. But the eviction is entirely about their own catastrophic greed. Natalia was shaking with rage. She turned to Elijah, grabbing his arm violently. "Do something, say something, defend your wife, Elijah. She is humiliating us." The entire room turned to look at my brother. For the past 15 years, Elijah had always capitulated. He had always chosen the path of least resistance, nodding along with Natalia's lies to keep the peace in his house. Elijah slowly looked up from the carpet. He looked at the faces of his aunts and uncles, filled with shock and disgust. He looked at me, standing tall and unbroken. Finally, he looked at the woman gripping his arm. "Let go of me, Natalia," Elijah said. His voice was quiet, but it possessed a raw, unfamiliar gravel that made everyone freeze. "What?" Natalia hissed, her eyes widening in genuine shock. Elijah stood up, physically peeling her fingers off his jacket. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "After Mary gave me the files on Friday, I went digging through your home office while you were at the salon yesterday. I found the hidden ledger, the one you kept in the lock. Ked drawer." Natalia took a step back, all the blood draining from her face. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. "You weren't just spending the credit cards, Natalia," Elijah continued, tears finally spilling over his eyelashes, his voice cracking with a profound, earth-shattering realization. "You took out a second mortgage on my life insurance policy. You forged my signature." The collective gasp in the room was deafening. Even I hadn't known about the life insurance fraud. "Elijah, honey, I was going to pay it back," Natalia stammered, raising her hands in a desperate, pleading gesture. "Stop it," Elijah roared, the sound tearing from his throat with years of repressed agony. "Just stop lying. You have ruined us. You isolated me from my sister, you convinced me I was a failure so I would depend on you, and then you secretly drowned us in debt. It's over, Natalia. I am done lying for you. I am done protecting you. I am absolutely done." He turned to me, his shoulders completely slumped, a broken man finally standing in the wreckage of his own life. "Mary, you are right. About everything. I am so sorry. I am so sorry." I looked at my brother, seeing past the gray hair and the wrinkled suit, seeing the frightened little boy I had promised my mother I would protect. He had finally woken up. The spell was broken. "I know, Elijah," I said softly, the anger finally bleeding out of me, leaving behind a profound sense of closure. "I know." The fallout from that Sunday afternoon was swift, brutal, and entirely definitive. By Monday morning, the bank formally initiated the delinquency process on the suburban house. Having lost the support of the extended family, and more importantly, having lost her control over Elijah, Natalia's carefully curated world collapsed entirely. I did not let the bank take the property. Instead, I used my extensive network in the real estate industry to fast-track a private sale. I sold the 5-bedroom estate to a young, successful tech couple who paid in cash. With the stroke of a pen, the house that had been the center of so much deception was wiped from my portfolio. Natalia was forcibly removed from the premises 2 weeks later. Without my financial backing, her creditors descended upon her like vultures. She was slapped with multiple civil lawsuits for the massive, unpaid credit card debts, and the life insurance fraud resulted in a devastating legal battle that entirely drained whatever hidden reserves she had left. She moved into a cramped, noisy apartment on the other side of the state. Her wellness consultant business entirely abandoned, as she was forced to take a minimum-wage retail job just to survive. Andrew, facing the reality of his defaulted personal loan, had to liquidate every single piece of his expensive camera equipment to avoid being taken to court. He was forced to abandon his delusions of internet stardom and enrolled in a local trade school, finally learning the harsh reality of earning a living. As for Elijah, the road was incredibly difficult, but for the first time in his adult life, it was honest. He filed for divorce immediately after the intervention at Aunt Helen's. The proceedings were messy, but with Richard's undeniable financial evidence, Elijah was granted a clean break from Natalia's fraudulent debts. I did not give him any money. I refused to repeat the mistakes of the past. However, I did use my professional connections to help him secure a modest, 1-bedroom apartment near my office, and I helped him get an entry-level administrative job at a logistics company run by an old colleague. 6 months after the disastrous birthday dinner that had changed everything, I sat at a table in Le Petit Jardin. It was the exact same private dining room, with the exact same crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over the mahogany table. This time, the table was set for 2. The door opened, and Julian, the maitre d', smiled warmly as he escorted my guest inside. Elijah looked entirely different. He had lost weight, the stress no longer puffing his face, and he wore a simple, clean button-down shirt. He looked tired, yes, but he also looked remarkably at peace. He sat down across from me, placing a small, beautifully wrapped box on the table. "I know it's 6 months late," Elijah said, a nervous, genuine smile touching his lips. "But happy 60th birthday, Mary. I bought it with my first actual paycheck." I reached across the table, my hand no longer trembling from illness or anger, and accepted the gift. Inside was a simple, elegant silver frame containing an old photograph of the 2 of us as children, standing in our parents' backyard, smiling brightly at the camera. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, but they were tears of profound healing. "Thank you, Elijah, it's beautiful." "I have a lot of years to make up for, Mary," he said quietly, looking down at his hands. "I let her twist my mind, I let her make me resent. The one person who was literally keeping me alive. I will never fully forgive myself for what I said to you on the phone that night. But I promise you, I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the brother you actually deserve." I looked at him, feeling the heavy, suffocating burden of the last 5 years finally lift from my shoulders. The toxic, parasitic dynamic that had poisoned our relationship was gone, burned away by the harsh light of the truth. I had protected my peace, I had secured my future, and in doing so, I had finally saved my brother from himself. "We have time, Elijah," I smiled, lifting my glass of sparkling water. We have plenty of time. Justice had been served, the boundaries were permanently drawn, and as we sat there, sharing a quiet, honest meal together, I knew that for the first time in my life, I was truly, completely free.